So what else can be said that hasn't already about Contra? It's probably the best two-player side-scrolling shooter on the NES and probably a contender for one of the best of all time. But let's take a closer look at the art and design of it. The first level opens perfectly with you tossed into the action from off-screen straight to the jungle at night. How you got there? Who cares? Maybe you jumped out of a helicopter or jumped across the ocean to this island because you're so badass. Either way, you're dodging bullets and enemies, all while trying to take them out and keep yourself alive. So despite this being a two-dimensional platformer, which was common for the NES, graphically Contra took it to the next level. Usually platformers had only one or two tiers, where Contra had multiple tiers to traverse the level. Bionic Commando did this the year before in 1987, but Contra was the one that perfected it. The first level has up to 4 tiers of platforms, and on top of that, the water I suppose counts as a 5th. I commend Konami for this decision, as water in games always was synonymous with death. Think back to the original Super Mario Bros. If you fell in the water, it was the same as falling in a pit. You were dead. But here, the water serves as a safety net as you get used to the controls, but also rewards you for traveling the higher and more dangerous platforms. Right here, if you're able to clear both of the exploding bridges, dodge multiple bullets, and shoot down the weapon capsule, you're graced with the coveted spread gun for the first time. The background of the first level is amazingly designed too when you look at it. It shows you where you're going to be traveling, deep into the jungle, and then eventually to the snow-capped mountains in the distance. There was an inclusion of a map in between levels in the Famicom version, like we're used to seeing in games like Castlevania and Ghosts and Goblins, that I really wish would have been included for more level continuity. So one of the most important things in the game are the points on structures that flash from red to that orange tan color to show weak points, with few variations. Be it either exploding from your presence, like when crossing that first bridge, to the giant target above the door leading to the final alien lair. Now, not all objects in the game that flash these colors are weak points, but it does denote a weak point when necessary. So I guess it's overkill to be told to shoot at a giant wall-mounted gun that's aimed at you, but what the hell do I know? The color scheme is bright and everything is well drawn, with no two levels having the same feel, save for the 2 underground bases, but we'll get to that later. The animations for your character and all the enemies are each distinct and solid. You're never really left guessing what anything is supposed to be, save for the main enemies that look like hulking football players in their giant shoulder pads. Now my favorite enemy has to be the dudes that wait underwater for you. Let's break this down and really take a look at it. This guy is shredding water endlessly and breathing through a snorkel that's only 8 pixels high in the hopes he'll get one single shot at you if you get close enough. But that's not enough for the guy on level 3. He waits in a fucking waterfall. Thousands of gallons of water are pouring down each second, but is that gonna stop him? Not a fucking chance. You really have to give him credit though. That's some extreme dedication for being a video game bad guy. The sheer size of some of the bosses is crazy too, especially for a Nintendo game of the time. I can remember distinctly 7-year-old me finally getting good enough to fight through the first level, only to come to a boss the entire height of the screen. From a technical standpoint, the average enemy is roughly 16 pixels tall, and this monstrosity being over 160. And keep in mind, the entire height of a screen on the NES is only 224. Despite it only being 2 cannons that lazily drop orange balls and a single sniper at the top, it's still an intimidating sight. And again, immediately you know that the giant orange flashing circle at the bottom is the weak point. Level 2 mixes it up with it now becoming a fixed third-person shooter. Ever wonder where later games like Wild Guns or NOM 1979 got their inspiration? I love the rock border around the edges to show how this base is essentially one long underground tunnel. Perspective is used really well here, especially after you blow up the wall and walk towards the next room with the lights on the ceiling receding and seeing the shadowed walls of the next room ahead. The walls themselves have either mounted guns or flashing targets that are, I guess, locks. As you destroy each one, you can see circuitry and loose wires behind them, which really gives you a sense of satisfying destruction. Aside from the enemies firing at you, there's rooms with these slots at the bottom of the wall where these metal rolling pins come at you. They're nicely drawn and animated to go with the perspective, but rolling pins, yeah, that's very intimidating. I guess to make up for that, there's always a constant sense of dread here, as there's a dual electric field right in front of your face, and your natural inclination would be to push up to advance further. However, if you touch it, instead of it killing you, it holds you in place with an electric shock, only to be taken out by an enemy bullet. So you're triple fucked here by A, getting held in place, B, shocked, and then C, shot. What a wonderful way to die. How about they also throw some of those rolling pins at you just to make sure you're fully dead?
There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead.
The boss you come to face builds off the difficulty of the previous one. Now you have dual cannons firing down and 4 flashing targets to take out. After that, I guess it's supposed to be some digital alien creature, and what? It spits bubbles at you? I like how after you defeat the boss, you take an elevator back to the surface again, showing how the entire level was deep underground. Level 3 changes the design again, with this being entirely vertical. All the hazards from the first level are here, but multiplied several times over, with the tiers of land being smaller, making the jumps more treacherous, moving platforms, and small fires that somehow move by themselves. The jump controls are super tight, and being able to steer yourself once you're in the air really helps out. The idea of water being a safety zone is now gone. But do you really want to jump into a raging waterfall? Now, once you reach the top of the waterfall, you progress to this cave area where the terrain changes from browns to deep grays, which gives you this foreboding feeling like you're heading into danger. So you keep heading up and up until the screen scrolls up to black, and then you get a giant xenomorph with dual spike ball arms, spitting fireballs, and then shooting even more fireballs from said spiked arms. Holy shit, that's fucking awesome. So awesome that I had to do a painting of it, and to this day it's one of my favorite bosses from any video game. The design itself is completely inspired by H.R. Geiger with its skeletal insect-like structure. I keep expecting to see a second set of jaws in that huge mouth it has. The fourth level is essentially a longer version of the second, just with more enemies and hazards. The border now, instead of being rock, is now mechanical, like this base has been built up more and you're now deeper into the enemy's territory. The way the flashing shields over the locks take damage is a nice touch and just adds to that satisfying destruction. The boss is also just a more difficult version of the one from level 2 with a slightly different setup and some enemies thrown in the mix. So after you destroy the targets and the guns, what do you get? A mashup of Optimus Prime and Wheeljack spitting bubbles yet again. Only this time they're smaller and look like the bubbles we blew with those bubble wands as kids. So I guess the formula goes, the more badass you are, the sillier your attack is. The fifth level, I'd say, is the second part of the game where the difficulty really gets ratcheted up. You're now in those snowy mountains that you saw in the background from the first level, and the color palette is now whites, grays, and dark blues, really giving you the feel of snow and ice. Since the level is called Snowfield, I guess that's only fitting. Most of the trees now are also below you, giving you that feel of being in the mountains and above the island. Those tanks you have to fight look like something Cobra would have used at a G.I. Joe. So it looks like Red Falcon hit up the Transformers and G.I. Joe also for help building his army. I love that spikes were included on the front and on the top just as death insurance in case you got the bright idea to try to jump over it. Note that the colors it changes are the same reds and oranges of weak points as it takes damage. One minor thing that always bothered me is when it explodes, it disappears into these nice, neat little segments. Whoa, level 6, the energy zone. I think we can all agree this is the toughest level in the game. Now, all the levels to this point, minus the 2 underground stages, have been organic, as you were fighting through jungles, forests, and mountains. This is the first level that's completely built by the alien army in steel and iron, and lets you know that you're closing in on Red Falcon. The entire level looks as if it's the aliens' power plant with all the pipes and flame bursts everywhere. I swear there's places in this level where it's impossible not to get killed. Like this jump right here has been the bane of my Contra experience for the past 20 plus years. Seriously, if you know how to get past this without dying, tell me what the hell I'm doing wrong down below in the comments. After that you come to the hangar, which is full of mechanical spiky death. I mean, look at this. You have these giant forks coming down to stab you in the head and these spiky walls popping up in your face like some Indiana Jones booby trap. So one thing I must say, you're fighting against this highly advanced alien race, you've seen all their technology, you're up to level 7, which is a giant mechanical hangar, and what are they using to transport shit is fucking minecarts. These aliens are so advanced that they use something straight out of the Industrial Revolution. So if they're going with the Indiana Jones motif, I guess the hangar is some kind of futuristic Temple of Doom. Do these caves lead to some guy ripping out hearts and people getting lowered into lava? The dual platform design of taking the more dangerous route for a reward or risking a large gap to get to the easier route is back again and designed perfectly. At the end of the level, you come to this structure with a huge flashing cross above the door. I guess they didn't want to be obvious or anything. Keep blasting away and you've made it to the final area of the game, the alien's lair. Now, despite this looking like an 8-bit replica of the hive from the movie Aliens, the level has an extremely creepy feel from that purple magenta color palette and those platforms that look like living organisms. Even in the Famicom version, the platforms pulsate like the entire level is alive, which I really wish they would have left in the US release. The first enemies you encounter are these chestburster-looking creatures coming at you from a giant blockade of hatched eggs, with a giant head above it, which clearly looks nothing like the alien queen. So from the beginning of the game, the only thing you knew about the end boss was that he was called Red Falcon. Well, this thing is red and definitely big enough to be the final boss, but no, you're not even close to the end. You have to fight through a gauntlet of these gross mouths which are filled with fuzzy white spiders, and that's not disgusting at all. I personally would have liked to see some other enemies here too, like the xenomorph creatures from Contra 3, but instead you get these huge face huggers that come charging at you over hatched eggs. So now you're at the queen, right? Nope, the final boss is some beating heart, which I always thought looked more like a liver or a kidney. This is the one thing that's always been a letdown for me, that there was no big epic battle at the end, but whatever. Keep shooting at that heart, liver, kidney until you give it a heart attack and the whole thing explodes. The game ends just like any action movie from the 80s would, escaping from the giant explosion by helicopter just in the nick of time. So you not only save the Earth from the aliens, but the entire universe, and if that's the case, I will consider myself a fucking hero. So that's Contra. That's one of my favorite games ever, and not just on Nintendo, but of all time. So please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.